My name's Debbie Kane. I'm the registrar at Waikato Coalfields Museum. It's a small museum, and like a lot of small museums in New Zealand, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. This one's particular to its community. It's got some really special treasures here. And then we tell the story of Huntly, we tell the story of the district and the region, but particularly we tell the story of coal mining. And that's a really special thing to this area. We tell the successes, we've got the machinery, we've got the artefacts, we've got textiles in the collection that relate to the miners and their families. We've got a huge photo collection, 4,000 photos, heritage photos that show the region and all the people. But it also tells the story of, as well as the successes, also tells the story of the tragedies. And there's some really sad things that have happened and the poignant stories, and nothing else can show them as well as artefacts that came from that time. Really tell that story. In small museums there's a lot of difficulties, there's a lot of hard parts to pulling it all together to make them run, and there's some really wonderful parts too. Like, we rely lots on volunteers. If we didn't have volunteers we wouldn't be here. But the hard part is getting the money, getting the cash to make things work, to bring them up to a professional standard. And that can be a difficulty. We have to apply to council for funds. We go out to other sponsors as well too. The registrar's job is to look after collections, and this museum has a range of collections, from objects that you can see here in displays to objects that are kept in the storeroom and pulled out for temporary displays. So we've got things like textiles, to big machinery that was used in the mines, to lots of archives that tell the stories of the people and their families, and a wonderful heritage photo collection. And we're pulling them all together for this community, but also for the visitors that come, the tourists too. And it's a really important part of a museum's job, is to connect with its community and to reflect its community and to help shape that community's identity. And I feel really privileged to be able to do that, and I feel really privileged to be able to handle these special items and to be able to care for them. The future for this museum is, at the moment, we're looking to get more funding just to help safeguard the treasures and the taonga that we have here. But long term we need to move to another building. This building was an authentic miner's house, so as a museum it has a few challenges. It's just not made to look after collections in the way that purpose-built museums are. So there's problems with temperature and environment and humidity that help look after the collections and safeguard them for the future. So we're looking for funding. We're going to work hard to get that, and we're going to look at building a new museum on a different site, still in Huntly, and it will be able to tell more stories and have more access for people to their wonderful collections.
Most of the people coming to work in the mines in Huntly in the early days came from Britain, from mines in Scotland, Cornwall, Lancashire, Yorkshire. And along with them came the wives and children. Of course, most of them had left behind their immediate families, so they came alone, just as a couple with the family. When they arrived in Huntly, they were, of course, a community based around the mining industry. So this meant that the women and the children were all interlinked with one another. If ever anyone was struggling, they would help one another. When there was a disaster, many of the women were left without a wage, and the children, if they hadn't a mother and the father had been previously looking after them, were left without a father and a mother. Having no relatives here besides their mother and father, those children orphaned would then have to go into an orphanage. So they completely lost all contact with any family members altogether. When the men went off to the mines, of course, none of the women would know whether or not they would have an accident, a major accident, and all the men took with them was their crib tin. The Cornish miners who came to Huntly would make Cornish pasties, which they would put in here, and it was vermin proof, so nothing could get to it, and that's all the men had to eat all day. When there was the disaster, one of the mine disasters, the women were then left without money and they had to rely on welfare. If their children were 14, they then didn't get any money because they were considered an adult. So a lot of children, a lot of families and women, mothers, really struggled with this. They were left penniless because most of the miners' wives in them days didn't work. They stayed at home looking after the family, doing the washing, cooking, cleaning, waiting for the husbands to come home. I'm interested in doing volunteer work in this fantastic museum because I come from a mining family in Lancashire. So that's why I can relate to it in this wonderful museum. There are so many things for people to look at and look at the past.
Early coal mining was an extremely dangerous occupation, as it is today. They went down into those mines, often not knowing whether they were going to come back. They had accidents that they had to worry about, and then also just the general conditions. It was so damp and dark. Physically, they were exhausted. When they went down in the mines, they had these little containers that they took morphine in, had it on their belt all the time. They were numbered so that they could do them. The people that suffered probably a lot with these mining conditions was the women folk.